So the League One relegation battle is something that really intrigues me because you can look at it from one of two different ways. On the one hand, you've got Plymouth Argyle, Port Vale, Blackpool, and Peterborough United, who three of them are on 16 points from 17 or 18 games, and Vale are actually on 14 points, with Exeter City hovering perilously just above on 17 points from their first 17 games, although City themselves have some serious problems. But above those five, you'd have to go up to 22 points for teams in 19th. But Albion, for instance, were mid-table recently. Doncaster had a really good start to the season, and then you're getting to Reading and Mansfield and Northampton, would-be relegation candidate, are on 23 points. So you've got five teams separated by 3 points between 24th and 20th, and you've got another five teams separated by just 1 point between 19th and 15th. So on the one hand, there's a big gap between 20th and below and 19th and above. On the other hand, there's teams that, for different reasons, you would expect to improve. Exeter are the team that I'm probably most worried about, despite being the highest of the five, due to their off-field troubles and the likelihood of a fire sale at St James's Park in January. But then Plymouth Argyle, Blackpool and Peterborough United were all expected to be higher in the table, and even Port Vale are doing quite well in terms of shop data, even if that hasn't translated into results and some would say performances. So plenty to discuss then on this League One podcast. So if you like what we do here at EFL Debate, you can do us a massive favour and get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. For now, my first guest of the evening is Scott of Picardy Breeze, a Port Vale fan. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Where do you sit on Port Vale and their position? Because on the one hand, the shop data this season, the numbers have actually looked pretty good. From anecdotally, I think Port Vale fans have maybe a different perspective. They think that the shop data is a red herring. How do you sort of read it all?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of things, to be honest with you, Gabe. And I think part of it is profligacy in front of goal is one thing, because ultimately the data shows that the chances are there and the shots are being had on goal, but perhaps, we're not converting them. I think maybe it's the fact that some of the chances aren't necessarily falling to the most clinical players. So Devante Cole was brought in to kind of be that clinical finisher after the departure of Laurent Talai. I don't think he's quite been on the end of quite as much as we would maybe hope for him to. But also, I think there's a little bit of an issue whereby we kind of overplay in the final third at times, rather than necessarily kind of getting it into the mixer and sort of creating chances that way. You'll often see games where teams will have an XG much lower than the XG that we've mustered, and will still score 3 or 4 goals in a game because, they just happen to get balls into the box and just go with that little bit more direct than us. Another thing that kind of plays into it as well is shape. I think that, the quality of chances that we create, and certainly the volume of chances, it's kind of hindered a little bit when you're playing wing backs that aren't wing backs in wing back areas. And like I say, injuries has kind of played a little bit of a part in that as well. So there's kind of a lot that's sort of made for a little bit of a perfect storm into, why we're so wasteful in that final third. But, I just think certainly from the game in midweek where we changed the shape, and also the injury news today where Mitch Clark and Liam Gordon, who have been among our best wing backs this season, are nearing a return now. There is that little bit of hope that, maybe we can actually start turning it around.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope, isn't it? Does the 5-0 victory at Barnsley give you any optimism on, obviously only a couple of players stayed in the 11 from the 1-0 defeat at Lincoln the previous Saturday. So has that given Darren more food for thought as well?
I think so, both in terms of personnel and also in terms of shape. I think we looked a lot more balanced in that 4-2-3-1 system, given that we actually played sort of fullbacks in fullback areas. So, they were able to just sort of sit in and defend. But also we kind of took the leash off sort of players in that sort of attacking three in behind the lone striker, Mo Fall. It just seemed a lot more cohesive. I think George Byers was able to kind of get forward and drop in a little bit more and just be more effective in that midfield. But also the likes of DeJourn Brown and Ben Wayne, who've kind of not really featured in the side regularly. They were actually surprisingly effective in those wide areas in the 4-2-3-1. I was worried a little bit that maybe they've not quite got the nuances in their game yet to look after the ball well in tight areas. maybe struggle with the physicality and perhaps quality of delivery into the box. But they actually really, really surprised me, and they kind of bring pace to the table, which is something that we lack in those forward areas. So I think that if we can get a tune out of them, it just gives us a little bit more options when we choose to deploy that shape. Because really, the only pace that we have in the team kind of comes from George Hall when he's in the side, and also those wing back areas. And as I've said already, we've been hit with injuries at wing back, and the lack of pace and athleticism, certainly in those wide areas, seems to really, really cost us when we stuck to that 3-5-2. So we've been clamouring for a change of shape for weeks to try and just get the best out of what we've got. Certainly what's available at the minute. And, we finally tried it against Barnsley and it seemed to work. Obviously, there's a little bit of caution in the sense that I know Barnsley only made a couple of changes and it seemed a strong side, but, is it down to the occasion? Did they not have quite as much in the tank as they would do for a typical league game? You've obviously got to factor that into the equation as well.
Absolutely. Scott, I think whenever a team's bottom of the table, the normal questions are going to get asked. I think that's perfectly normal, isn't it? People have sort of raised questions of Darren Moore, but from an outside perspective, I don't think that Port Vale are going to make a change. I even think Darren Moore will get the season, come what may, and possibly the opportunity to start next season as manager, whichever division that is, because I think Carol Shanahan, as an owner, prioritises certain values, which is sticking with people who have done good work for the club previously. And I think there's a real positive to that in terms of the sort of almost maternal qualities that she's brought to the club, and the values and the community and the sticking together, because I think she's big on that. But on the flip side of that, I can't see her making the sort of cold, ruthless decisions that other clubs might do. So personally, I think the club is going to stick with Darren Moore, come what may.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a feeling of that around the place as well, Gabe, in the sense that, she has been quite slow to sort of make decisions like that previously. We've seen it with Darryl Clark, we've seen it with Andy Crosby. So given that Darren Moore does have that credit in the bank of, having taken the club back up to League One at the first time of asking, is she more inclined to kind of stick with? And I think the biggest gripe with that supporters particularly have got with him at the minute is, he's had plenty of opportunities with injuries at wing back to try and change shape and kind of get the best out of who's available. And he's just not done it for so long. And then now we've gone and finally done it in a trophy game. We've seen kind of what the impact of that might be. And it's almost a case of, have we thrown 4, 5, 6 games away by not making that change sooner? And I think that's kind of the main gripe that supporters have got. It's sticking to type and not necessarily, doing the right by the players that are fit. And I think changing shape and going with something that's suitable and is going to get the best out of what you've got available is always better to me than having square pegs in round holes and almost leading to a much more kind of disjointed performance. And we've seen a lot of that in recent weeks. Hopefully Tuesday was a sign that, we're prepared to change things, and, Moore has kind of brought that in mind. But like I say, obviously we'll see what Saturday brings in the FA Cup match.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that surprises me a little bit though, Scott, because I felt like one of Darren Moore's strengths last season was his ability to change shape. I'm sure he did that quite a fair bit, and that it certainly wasn't the case that he definitely used the squad and he chopped and changed. So it doesn't seem like somebody who would be too rigid or sort of wedded to one particular system. So it surprises me that it actually has taken him a while to go back to the back four, but it is something that I imagine we'll see him stick with, given how well he played in midweek. Hopefully that's the template laid out.
Yeah, hopefully so. And even last season, we did have sort of one big seismic change. I mean, we played a lot of 3-4-3 sort of for the first half of the season with a lot of rotation, and then we sort of switched to 3-5-2 from the beginning of January onwards. Still the back three, but sort of having two up front and sort of trusting in Laurent Talai really kind of revitalised us. And I think it kind of needs a similar reset now. We've gone in with 4-2-3-1. We made a couple of drastic changes by bringing in Ben Wayne from the cold and DeJohn Brown into the team. And, they've shown a bit about what they can do when given the freedom, and they're not having to kind of like, drop in and defend and play wing back roles. Because I think almost giving players that aren't suited to that role that sort of responsibility, it kind of puts the shackles on from an attacking point of view. But because they're not used to defending and maybe don't have the athleticism that a Mitch Clark, a Jordan Gabriel or a Liam Gordon can bring to the table, it leaves a lot of spaces in behind and just leads to a lot of pressure on that back three. So it just feels as if with who's available and who's suited to playing where, that 4-2-3-1 just gives us so much more cohesion, so much more balance to the side, and it just gives the freedom to those sort of younger attacking players. And I think now, really, I mean, we've got nothing to lose being bottom of the league, 3 points off safety. I know there's a little bit of a gap between us and 19th, but maybe now is the time to trust in the new shape, trust those young players, and just let them bring what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed that can work. Thanks so much for your insight, Scott, and look forward to catching up later in the season.
Yeah, likewise, Game. Pleasure as always, mate.
Top man. Cheers, Scott. So my next guest is Mr. Joe Bell from Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast. Joe, lovely to have you on. After a defeat again, I know I'm sorry about that.
It's certainly a defeat in the only meaningful game we've played in the last 7 days, anyway, Gab.
Absolutely, yeah. So Plymouth Argyle, difficult situation, some big questions being asked at the moment.
Yeah, not a huge amount's changed since I was on a couple of weeks ago. The place is still in a bit of a mess. Obviously, as everyone will have seen, because I think it's gone pretty viral in places now about the fans forum that was held on Monday night. First of all, fair play to Simon Hallett, Paul Byrne and Derek Adams for having the minerals to step up in front of a pretty hostile crowd.
Yeah.
It was clear it was a different type of group that were normally present for a fans forum, which is a sign of the times, really. Usually these fans forums have often been quite a positive, upbeat event for supporters, but this one was anything but. And anybody of an Argyle persuasion who found that easy viewing needs to go see a doctor pretty quickly, because that was very tough. It was not an enjoyable hour and 40 minutes. And there's the obvious sign. They normally last 60, 65 minutes. This one went on for 100. So it was tough. As I say, fair play to them for getting up there. Were a lot of the questions asked? To a sense, was a lot of reassurance given? Absolutely not. I think the situation is far more precarious than we first thought. Paul Byrne's parting gift at the end of the forum to say that the finances at the moment are perilous, and Simon Hole mentioning there's a black hole in the finances that he and the other shareholders are going to have to plug, is a concern when you've had 2 seasons raking in every coin out of the championship that's humanly possible while we're there. And having made the money in January we did, having made the money in the summer that we did, of course it's a grave concern as to what's going on with the finances. But
Probably he didn't. I was just going to say, Joe, I think probably didn't cash in on Morgan Whitaker and Michael Cooper for the money that you could have done, which is probably
or Ryan Hardy and Adam Randall.
Yeah.
I was on in the summer bemoaning the fact the pair of them went for $1.5 million. Now, obviously, Ryan Hardy has played about 20 minutes for Wrexham since he's gone there, but Adam Randall, week in, week out, by all accounts, is showcasing exactly what he's about in the Championship and has nailed down his position in the Robin side. So, look, it's frustrating. As I say, Simon Hallett's given a very detailed chairman's chat this evening, which came out literally an hour before, so I've only had a chance to scan and read it. So I've not, but I think by all accounts he's gone into detail, perhaps the points he couldn't get across or felt he wasn't able to get across on Monday. So it's testing times, Gab. We as a club, we've not been in this position now for 8-9 years. And I'm not just, on the pitch we've had bleak times, but it's rough waters that Argyle are sailing in at the moment, and it's going to need some strong leadership to get us out of it.
So I don't think there's a huge difference between the version of Simon Hallett when Plymouth Argyle had the most successful period of their modern era and the Simon Hallett that you have now. Because I think what's the constant is that Simon Hallett is somebody who will lead with trusting other people, because he does relinquish a lot of power in his role as chairman, and he entrusts the CEO, the director of football, the manager or head coach. He entrusts people across the football club to get things right, head recruitment. And I think when Argyle was successful, your Andrew Parkinsons, your Jimmy Dickinsons, your debatably Neil Snips, Stephen Schumacher, they all got those decisions. They got those moves right. And it made Simon Hallett's job a lot easier, because all he did was kind of trusting those people to do their jobs. And now he's done pretty much the same thing. It's just the people that he's trusted haven't done that. So it's almost like Simon Hallett was lauded in 2023 when he was almost the king of Argyle, given the keys to the city, and he's castigated now and shouted things from fans forums in 2025. And I think it's pretty much the same person. I don't think Simon Hallett's actually changed very much.
I absolutely agree, Gab. He admitted himself that we've used the same processes this summer as we did in those great times. Processes. That's how he terms it, so I'm going with it. Okay. We've used the same setup, the same approach this summer as we did then. It's just the landscape has changed, and they've not executed it properly. And they were not willing to blame one individual on Monday night. The board, the representatives of the board that were there firmly believe that our current predicament is down to excessive staff turnover, key staff in the last 18 months. Nobody can disagree with that. It's been like a revolving door inside Home Park, and below average recruitment in this summer, when we had the ability, and they have data from the Football League that suggests we have exactly the 6th biggest budget from the summer. So our budget should have us 6th place in division. Now, we are horrifically underperforming that. We know that. But they believe that the budget was there in place and it just wasn't implemented properly. So now it's left to Derek Adams to essentially right those wrongs. The fact of the matter is, Gab, the boundaries have changed. Our one ambition from now is survival. And as an Argyle fan, that's bleak. That is bleak. When you think, I was only joking to my other half and my old boss earlier on. 14 months ago, we beat Sunderland at Home Park. Last night, they're bemoaning the fact they only got a point at Anfield, and they're sticking in the Premier League. So we have to fix the mess. It's got to
when you got a draw at Anfield, you were celebrating.
We were. Derek Adams still believes it was the best defensive display Anfield's ever seen. But look, that's just where it is. And
better than Barcelona.
We're in a very tough spot, and only we can put it right. And they've got to have the full faith in what they're going to do in January, because survival is the first aim, and then next season we have to be realistic, because there are going to be Simon Hallett outlined it on Monday night. There are going to be significant losses from this football club this year. This is probably going to be the worst financial report of his tenure. So next year we're going to have to move the goalpost again next year on what we would expect. But if we can unite everybody back together, this football club can take on anybody. We've seen it in the last 3.5 years. So it's now about winning back the trust and the respect of everybody. But as he's put at the end of his statement today, that's not going to be done by statements. That's not going to be done by fans forums. That's going to be done by actions and getting decisions right.
Yeah, absolutely. So January then, Joe, it does sound like it's going to be limited. It's going to be, you're going to be able to bring in 2 players, and then more possibly, depending on, it could be a bit of a one in, one out situation, depending on who else goes. I think I would probably prioritise, can you bring in a sort of a mid-2020s clone of Graham Coughlin and Paul Watton?
We have a running joke in the podcast group chat that Jake Jervis and Jan Songo are going to appear at Home Park on January the 1st.
Oscar Threlkeld.
Oscar Threlkeld and Craig Tanner as well. No, look, I think you're right. You're right in what you say. They've been public. We've got the budget to bring in 2 players at least. We're going to see loan players come in. I don't know whether I've read it properly, but reading between the lines, I wouldn't be convinced that all 3 of our loan players that we've currently got in the building will be here beyond January.
Do you think the Middlesbrough lad, Law McCabe's going to get recalled?
I think McCabe will probably be recalled.
Okay.
Certainly. I don't think it's serving his development any good being at a club in the position we are. So I think we're going to see a high turnover in terms of the loan players. We've got the budget to bring in 2, but we are going to lose players. From a business point of view, Gab, Connor Hazard's out of contract in the summer.
Yeah.
We can't afford for him to go away on a free in the summer because that's just poor business practice. You've got the possibility of, what's Barley Mumba's future? The guy has worked under 5 head coaches now at Plymouth Argyle. On Saturday against Northampton, he played yet another new position as a striker. So he's still not nailed down a position. So what's Barley's future? Players like that, there's going to have to be tough business decisions made. And you are right. We can bring in 2. We will absolutely utilize the loan market, but then it will be a case of, right, we'll shift him out to get X in sort of thing. What I expect from the recruitment is that we will be signing very few players under the age of 25. I think there's
I think that's wise.
A real mentality and leadership issue within the dressing room that needs to be fixed, because when we go behind, we're so soft and it needs proper leaders. We saw it in the summer. We can do it. We signed Jamie Patterson, Owen Dale, and obviously Joe Rules recently. So we can bring the experience in. And you can't help but feel that now that he's up to match minutes, Joe Rules and the returning Joe Edwards, along with Julio Pleguezuelo, are just going to be massive for us.
I completely agree. I was going to mention Julio Pleguezuelo because he's someone who's played at championship level. I think he's very highly rated across Europe. I'm pretty sure when he first signed for you, there were people that I spoke to an expert who said they'd have expected him to go top end championship. So this is a good footballer, and hopefully he could be a nice foil for Matthias Ross, at least between now and January.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question mark over Matthias Ross's physicality for this league, which I think needs to be addressed as well. But you're right about Pleggy. I mean, for me, he's head and shoulders our best centre half. And now that we've gone to a more pragmatic 4-4-2 system, which, any football fan knows the best way to nullify a team's threat and to try and make yourself hard to beat is just to go into 2 banks of 4. It worked perfectly at Port Vale. It worked brilliantly in the Mickey Mouse Trophy car thing in midweek.
4-4-2 is quite a nice stabilising formation, isn't it? When you're a little bit lost, you go back to 4-4-2, you go back to some principles, you've got outlets, you've got a shape. It's quite a nice
players look so much more comfortable playing that system. And you think that, I would imagine personally, the 2 will be Alex Mitchell and Pleggy at centre back. I think those 2 are the physical, strong types. You've obviously got Cornell Such to play at right back. It helps when you're playing a 4-4-2 that your only goal scorer doesn't go around elbowing defenders. And that will obviously need to be sorted out, because now, he's left us in a really difficult position of who's going to play up front now for the next 3 games. So we're obviously going to need at least one more striker to go up there as well. So look, it's tough, but it's never easy being an Argyle fan.
It certainly isn't. Do you think Brendan Wirrady could be like a new signing now he's moving into midfield? Because he came through at Charlton Athletic as a midfielder and initially played there at Colchester, which is where he earned the move to League One with Fleetwood. At Fleetwood, one of the managers he had there, possibly Scott Brown, converted him into a centre half. And so for 2 or 3 years, that's where he's been playing. But actually, he is a midfielder sort of initially by trade. So do you think he's someone who could come in and make an impact with the Football League experience that he can bring now? Because I think he's played certainly 3 figures of Football League games, whereas others might not be true of.
And he spent a chunk of that as a captain, Gav. at Fleetwood, obviously leading that group. And Tom Cleverley referenced it in midweek after the Leyton Orient win that, you know, he had a tough debut when he played in that midfield against Barnsley. And, you know, the tough debut was he obviously put one in the back of his own net. Now, from that moment, they then just decided, right, well, he's got to go back to centre back. And it was totally the wrong decision because he even says it himself in interviews. He's a midfielder. And he looked a lot more assured in midweek. Obviously, you've got a caveat, but Leyton Orient and made a load of changes, and it wasn't, you know, you got Theo Archibald was only just coming back from injury, so you don't know how match sharp he was in terms of the problems he would have caused to our midfield if he's fully fit. So it'll be an interesting one. I don't know whether I expect him to play there on Saturday. Only because obviously without Talai, I'm not really sure how we're going to set up. Because I cannot imagine for the life of me that he's going to go Owen Aseni and Bali Mumba as the 2 in the 4-4-2. I can't envision it. And Peppel's been out for a little while now, and it's a huge risk to throw him in. You know, it might get to desperate measures where Mateus Ross isn't physical enough to play at the back, but he's a tall threat to go up front. I mean, you know, it's tricky, but I suspect we'll probably revert maybe to a 4-2-3-1 or even just a 5-4 or a 4-5-1 sort of situation on Saturday. Now, that is insanely negative, and at a time where everybody needs to be right behind the group and people need to have something to hang on to, setting up like that at home in a must-win game is probably not the wisest move, but needs must when Talai did what he did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. That's what we needed.
Cheers, mate. And he sent us through in that Mickey Mouse thing in midweek as well, just to rub salt into the wound.
No, yeah, it's like the one thing that you could have clung on to. You know, Bradley Ibrahim's injured, the team's struggling. You want your goal scorer to be on the pitch, but do you think Argyle are going to stay up, Jay?
I said no when I was last on, didn't I? And I've not really seen anything in the game since to give me any more encouragement. I think it's probably, we said it, I'm sure I said it last year after we sacked Rooney, that this was the biggest January in Plymouth Argyle's modern history. Well, this absolutely is, because relegation to League Two would be catastrophic. Like literally rip it up, start again territory almost. So it's massive. Derek has a huge amount of weight on his shoulders. And it just needs leadership, Gab. It needs players to come in and not stand for some of the nonsense that we've had from games when we've gone behind. I think, you know, the signing of Joe Rules offers encouragement. If we can entice one or two players like that, then great. But this is a huge workload for Derek to get this right in January, because there's so little room for error. So I'm probably going to have to stick with no, because I need something to cling on to, and we haven't got it.
Yeah, well, hopefully next time I have you on, you got something a bit more to shout about, and I'll try not to have you on after a defeat.
I'm going to plan this show from now on, Gab. As soon as we win, I'm just going to message you, and I am coming on after a league win.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that. Cheers, Joe. And
see you in April.
See you. So my next guest is Jack Jones of Rambling Rovers. Thanks for coming on, Jack. Appreciate your time. Been a streaky season for Doncaster so far.
Mixed bag, Gab. I think it's fair to say. More wins in the cups than we have in the league. And that sort of evens it out a little bit, because I know we don't take the Mickey Mouse Cup too seriously. As Joe's just been saying, but obviously we had a decentish run in the Carabao Cup. And then obviously we've got round to the second round at FA Cup. So we've had, our wins have come mainly in there. We had a cracking start to campaign. And we've just dropped off a little bit of late. But performances for me, Gab, and I think probably majority of Rovers fan base, and McCann alluded to it when we were going through our sticky patch. You know, barring that Leyton Orient 4-0 drumming away from home, don't think we've not really been battered in games. You know, it's been edgy, and even Saturday against Peterborough, McCann sort of altered his tactics of let's go all gung ho and get more goals than the opposition, and took a winger off for a centre back with 25 minutes to go, which showed you how cagey that game ended. But performance-wise, being back in League One, I mean, position obviously, I think we sit 19th, maybe 18th going into the weekend. But points-wise, I think I'd have took where we're at, you know, and I think points-wise, in a not a normal season, would have been a little bit further up table. But look, we're Donny Rovers, we're back in League One for the first time of asking, and to be realistic, it's all about survival for me this season. And if we're right side of that dotted line come May, then I'm more than happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the point and clean sheet at Stevenage was steadying the ship for you to get that victory over Peterborough the following week?
Yeah, well, we went to Reading, I think, week before, or a couple of weeks before, got a 1-1 draw down there. And results, aside performance, it had been relatively good, and not many people, not many teams this season, you know, break Stevenage down or keep Stevenage out, should I say. And we went there, and it by all accounts, how many times we've come away from games this season saying we should have won that game. It's about them big moments and taking them chances, and we kind of lose to that quite often. And I could pull many out of the bag from this season where you pick moments out in games where you think you've got to score. And Harry Clifton had a golden opportunity at Stevenage, and to be fair, keeper made a tremendous save, but you know, he shouldn't have been allowed to make that save. And it's just been them fine margins, which I think has been the difference of League Two and League One. You know, there's games this season where we've drawn or we've lost the game, and in League Two you win that scrappy, because League One's got a lot more quality than what League Two has, obviously. And yeah, it's been a mixed bag, mate. Been a mixed bag.
Yeah, certainly has. One thing I was curious to ask you about, Jack, was starting Billy Sharp up top, because for a long time I felt like it was possibly difficult for you to play the game in the way that Grant McCann likes. When I think of a Grant McCann team, I always think aggressive, athletic, energetic against the ball. Difficult to really do that for 90 minutes if you're starting sort of a veteran like Billy Sharp, who's been a wonderful football league goal scorer over the last 20 years, but Brandon Hanlon coming in.
It's been a big question of mine, really, throughout the summer to now. I mean, as you know, the striker market in the summer was really tough, especially for lower budget end sort of League One sides. You know, we haven't got the, you know, ideally in an ideal world, you'd go and pay £1 million for Rob Street, who came in last season and turned our fortunes around, if you like. And we just can't do that. You know, you've seen Argyle, who have gone and got Talage from Port Vale. The likes of Barnsley that can go and pinch Keeler done from Mansfield like they did last season. We just haven't got the capabilities and the funds to do that. So the idea of Hanlon, who's never really been a prolific striker, wherever he's been, in my opinion, he's not had that pedigree. He's not a 20-goal a season striker.
Yeah.
And it started off really poorly, to be fair with him. I questioned why we even fetched him in. Did McCann think he could sort of give him that little bit of McCann dust sprinkle that he's done with the likes of Adelic and Rob Street and try and get the best out of him? And we're seeing that now, in fairness to Hanlon, last few games. A little bit like an Ironside. Maybe he's not going to score you 20 goals, but what he can offer you is much more. And we've seen that certainly over the last few weeks. But with regards to Billy Sharp, it might be 39, Gab, but his fitness levels are off the scale for a 39-year-old. He played 90 minutes last night in the Virtue, on Tuesday night in the Virtue Trophy, got a hat-trick and looked absolutely capable of going on for another half an hour if needed. You know, that's my opinion.
I get that, but Jack, and I think he is a phenomenal professional for you know, the ages and how and that side of it. But you know, when Brandon Hanlon, if you've got Brandon Hanlon running in behind or Billy Sharp, it's a slightly different.
Totally. And I think, well, the sort of at the beginning of the season, obviously we fetched Olasanya in as well, just before the window shut on deadline day, or we've not really had a chance to see much of. He's been out for the last 4 weeks injured, and he's sort of getting 20 minutes here and there in that rough patch that we were going through. And I think it'd be really unfair to pass a full judgment on him, because we've just not seen him play. And I expect him to go back in January and we'll look at other options, because what we did see of him weren't great. But you know, I think McCann compensates playing Billy Sharp because we've got great outlets in wingers that can chip in with goals, and we've had Owen Bailey obviously as well, who's been chipping in with a few. So if Billy Sharp's not scoring, we do rely on the capabilities of Luke Molyneux, Jordan Gibson, who's been in fine form of late. Middleton's yet to get off the mark for us, but creates a lot of opportunities. And of course, you've got your wing backs in Maxwell and Sterry as well that can get forward and create as well, which allows your wingers to get inside into the box a little bit. And yeah, goals come from all over. But I'm not too worried, but we are crying out for that athletic striker. But Anlund seems to have just found his feet on what McCann expects from his players, and I think that was the difficult thing at the beginning of the season, in my opinion. Was he came on at Huddersfield 2-0 down. I think back to that day, and we should have been out of sight at half time, but we weren't, and that's been sort of the story of the season with chances, as I alluded to earlier. And he just didn't seem to run and sprint. I know you're 2-0 down, you come on with 15 minutes to go, it's hard, but you got 2,500 in away end. Your manager, Grant McCann, is expecting you to chase every loose ball down, and he just weren't doing that. And I think he dropped out at team. He missed out on a few match day squads, and I think I see him now, and he gives it, he gives it his everything, and I think he's learned what it takes to be a McCann player. But Billy Sharp, we can't rely on for a 40-odd game season. It's just not going to happen, and we need to get another striker in January. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a big target. One player who really impressed me last season, Jack, was Jay McGrath, because he's just got this imposing presence about him. Just the fact that he's just not going to be bullied off the ball, and he holds his ground so well in physical duels, especially on the ground. How's he found that sort of step up to League One so far?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, again, another player last few weeks back to his best. At the beginning of the season, I believe, if memory serves me correct, he was out with an injury for just a couple of weeks, and it never really looked like the Jay McGrath that we saw last season. And a little bit worrying because, Plymouth, I believe, came in with quite a hefty bid in the summer that Rovers turned down and retained his services. And yeah, just didn't seem to be the same Jay McGrath that we knew he could be. But over the last certain weeks, mate, terrific alongside Conor O'Riordan. We've got a really, really young back line, really, and two centre halves. Pearson seemed to have lost his place, and you're swapping that experience for youth. But both of them in recent weeks have been terrific, and yeah, I think McGrath's finding that step up now more than ever. Pretty well, yeah, pretty good.
Another player who seems to have stepped up well is George Broadbent. I think I might have possibly underestimated his sort of playmaking qualities, Jack, because he's always stood out to me as a sort of bit of an old-fashioned 8 midfielder who can pass, tackle, run. I think his long-range passing is good. Last season, I maybe wasn't sure about how he would be sort of conducting the play necessarily when it's not those kind of Hollywood passes. But actually, he stepped up to League One, and from what I can gather, he's actually done really well.
Yeah, terrific, mate. Honestly, a little bit of a backstory. Me and Ainsley, who I know went to meet the owners event a couple of years ago. We'd only just signed George Broadbent, and we'd not really seen much of him under McCann's first season. And we, a lot of us at Rovers have that, especially myself and Ainsley, that we always missed the Ben Whiteman type of player since Ben Whiteman left for Preston. We never really replaced him, and we never found that quality. And McCann said to us at the Meet the Owners 6 months after signing George Broadbent, you go on about the Ben Whiteman. He said, I'm telling you now, we've got a player in George Broadbent that you've not seen yet, but I assure you he's going to be that player. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it, and he has. He's been terrific alongside Owen Bailey. Them to a brilliant match in midfield. Engine room. He's tackling. He's long range passing. His short range passing. He's finding his feet in League One. Not a problem. Alongside Owen Bailey as well, which was the perfect partner for him. They both really compensate each other really well. And as much as we sit in that bottom 7 or 8 teams in League One, I'm really positive sat talking to you and things I've seen so far this season. And it's for a lot of our squad, what we've got to remember is this is the first time in League One. Your Luke Molyneux, your Jay McGraths, your Owen Baileys, your George Broadbents. It's the first time at this level, and for me, I think we're doing a fine job, mate. I really do.
Certainly are. From the way you're talking then, Jack, I imagine you're pretty confident. I've got you on the dogfight chat, but I imagine you're pretty confident that you're going to pull away and be in that sort of middle 8 bracket.
Yeah. Look, I think what we have to be as a fan base is realistic as to where we're going to be. And when people at the start of the season are rambling Rovers and we're having these discussions of let's have a prediction and know where we're going to be. I think a lot of us were still had our promotion heads on, and we'd had them 6 wins to start the season off, and we beat Bradford, who were riding high at time. And this is really good. But realistically, look, we're at a bottom at half League One side on paper. This league is almost, I like to call it, a mini championship. You look at the teams at the top of the division with your Boltons, etc., Lutons, and whoever else is up there. But obviously, Stephen is being the anomaly, but proving everybody how it can be done correctly. I I look at the team, I think, right, on paper, I think there's 5 or 6 teams probably worse than us. And I think there's probably 10 or 11 teams that are definitely better than us. So I put us in that mid-table range. What we do know, certainly from a Grant McCann team, and especially this Grant McCann Rovers side the last 2 or 3 years, is we like a run after Christmas. We like to recruit in January some loan players that we magically turn into star players and send back to the clubs and say, there you go, we've produced this product for you. You can have him back, and we're not going to see him again. But we go on a run, and I'm just wondering if mentality is going to come into that, because the players have been in that mindset now for the last 2 or 3 years, where they go on this mazy run after Christmas, and are they going to be ready for it again? It's a different level. There's some tough games to come, but I fancy us to be away from danger. That's my prediction. I think anywhere 16th to 14th is probably where I see us finishing at the end of the season.
Great stuff. Well, Jack, thanks so much for your insight, and look forward to catching up later in the season.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks for your time, mate.
Brilliant stuff. So we have heard from Danny Brothers of Cobblers to Me. Think the download has come through. Looks that way, so I'm going to play that now. We will be joined by Rob Walker of Blackpool Tangerine Army, but here's what Danny Brothers of Cobblers to Me on Northampton Town has to say, sending across his video message.
Hi guys, Danny here from the It's All Cobblers to Me podcast, live from a Tesco car park on a Thursday night. Doesn't get more glamorous than that, just before the weekend. Just here to give you some thoughts on the Cobblers season so far, and what we can expect in the coming weeks. Yeah, it's been pretty good. We're 15th at the moment in League One, so steering clear of any kind of relegation scrap, as was widely predicted again by a lot of people before the season started. So doing really well. Feels like we're pushing on a little bit from last season and trying to avoid that, getting involved in any kind of relegation battle. We have kind of come close to the line a couple of times, but for the most part we've had enough to stay above in mid-table so far. So it's a really weird League One at the moment, I think, so far as well, that you can win a couple of games and move right near the playoffs, you can lose a couple of games and move right down near the bottom 4 again. But yeah, thankfully 7 points clear of that blue lot from down the road, which is always good. There was quite a big turning point in our season, actually, a couple of weeks ago when we played Mansfield at home. We were 1-0 down at Sixfields to Mansfield, and then changed the formation at half-time to go for 2 up top. We had been playing Ethan Wheatley on his own up front, and it just had not been working. We hadn't got the best out of him. We hadn't got the best out of the entire team, really, in terms of getting goal chances and getting efforts on goal, getting a goal threat. We looked like we just were not going to score a goal. Soon as Tom Eaves came on at half-time against Mansfield, everything changed, everything clicked. We had a man extra in midfield. It meant we had support for Ethan. Tom Eaves just gave Ethan that time to make his runs, to get on the ball a bit more, to drift wide if he wanted to, and we've really seen the best out of him so far since then, basically. We lost to Cardiff after that, but still played really well. We went to Plymouth last weekend and won 3-0. Again, seeing some really good link-up play between the two, seeing the likes of Terry Taylor getting involved a lot more, Tyrese Forners being a lot more kind of influential from his midfield role rather than being out wide on the wing. And it's really looking positive, actually, in a minute. I think we're slowly but surely getting there. We've even won a few cup games. We've beaten Wickham for the first time in about 300 years. So through to the area quarterfinals in the EFL Trophy, and things, yeah, slowly starting to look up, and it's a lot more entertaining these days. We're playing some really good football. Most people who lose to us will come on and say, oh, it was hoofball, it was long ball. It just isn't at the moment. It's a mix of styles. We will play direct when we need to, but at the same time we're playing some really nice football, and I think the second goal, especially against Plymouth, which Elliot List scored, was an example of that. We're really mixing it up. The squad seems a lot stronger these days as well in terms of fitness wise. Likes to John Guthrie coming back will be really important. When Sam Hoskins comes back, hopefully mid-December, that'll be important as well, and the squad is just looking really decent. I think in January we'll probably just need a couple of extra options up front, where we are fairly thin on the ground up there. If one of Tom Eaves or Ethan Wheatley gets injured, Elliot List is the one in reserve at the moment, but and even he's looking decent as well now. But we probably could do with a little bit more firepower in there. I can't envisage just doing loads of business in January. But yeah, hopefully things looking good. And ahead of Tuesday night against Huddersfield, should be a good crowd, good atmosphere, and hopefully looking all right ahead of the Big Nen derby on the 13th. So yeah, that's all from us, I think. Hope everyone's well watching this, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Danny Brothers from Cobblers to me seem pretty optimistic, don't they? Yeah, down at Sixfield. So things going in the right direction for Kevin Nolan's side as they look to try and put some gap between themselves and the relegation zone. We're hoping to close that gap are Blackpool. So I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Walker of the Tangerine Army. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Mixed start for Ian Evatt after a 3-0 loss at Reading last time out.
Yeah, that's what I start actually. I don't normally do this very often. I like to give some praise to an opposition player. I think as when your team gets beat, you sort of tend to look at your own team's display and performance with your sort of specs on. And it's very rare where an opposition player sort of grabs your attention. I think previous to this game, it was only, I think, David Silva when we played Man City in the Premier League. I think James McAtee when we played Sheffield United. Players that really stood out. I'm thinking, wow, they've had an absolute amazing game. But there's a player for Reading called Daniel, excuse my pronunciation, Daniel Kiawara, was it?
I don't know if I'm hugely familiar with the name myself. Let me have a look.
So basically, I'd never heard of him. I had to do a bit of Googling actually. Yeah. So he's actually a German player from Dusseldorf's academy. He went to Schalke, played for their second team, then played for another German team, I think in the third division. He absolutely destroyed us. Right. He was head and shoulders the best player on the pitch. He tore poor Michael Hickway to pieces, sent him to cleaners several times. He won the penalty, he was involved in the goals. He was just on another level. Right. So, I mean, if he can continue those displays for Reading, then he won't be at Reading for very long. He was just, yeah. So, yeah, as bad as Blackpool were after Reading scored that first goal, I've got to say he was head and shoulders by far the best player on the pitch. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that because it's not always a case where an opposition player gets credit from the losing team.
Yeah, well, if he's in company of David Silva, he's probably not doing too badly for himself. I suppose picking up on that theme then, Rob, one thing that stood out to me about the 11 under Ian Evatt is that you've got two. It's very much three centre halves. Normally, when you play three at the back and you want to play the Ian Evatt version of that, you like to have one sort of middle centre half who's a definite centre half, maybe another one in one of the wide positions. But you also want to have one who's a bit more like a fullback or is at least a centre half who's quick and strong and good in 1v1 duels. Whereas it feels like with Icky, Horse and Casey, they're centre halves, if you like, and then maybe that makes them somebody like Icky a bit more vulnerable to those quick wide attackers who are on their game.
Yeah, totally. I think that was the case against Reading. They were definitely targeting our sort of channel areas between the sided fullbacks, the wing backs and the sided centre backs, and they got so much joy on either side. So, yeah, I 100% agree with that statement about the centre backs. I think James Husband, who's more of a left-sided centre-back, maybe doesn't have quite the pace, but he's certainly more of a more ball player than the three you've mentioned. But unfortunately, it's just been needs must at the moment. We haven't really got any other options at centre-back. I think obviously playing a 4-4-2 previously, we probably only needed 4 centre-backs, whereas now you're playing a back three, you need probably at least 5-6 centre-backs to rotate. So yeah. I will think that probably Ian Evatt will be targeting a centre-back in the January window. And like I say, someone with a bit more pace, maybe a bit more of a ball player, because I do think the back three look very similar. I think not just the back three, I think the midfield three as well, because on Saturday against Reading, we played a midfield three of George Honeyman, Jordan Brown and Lee Evans. So there's not a lot of creativity there. I know Honeyman can be a bit box-to-box. Evans can occasionally create, but it felt quite samey, if that makes sense. I think. Yeah,
it's very industrious, isn't it? It's Evans is the holding midfield. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I think when the team was announced, that was the feeling in the pub before the game, that it didn't look very creative. You know, we had, I suppose, natural fullbacks in Andy Lyons and Hayden Coulson, but in terms of creativity, like Josh Bowler's injured, Scott Banks and Emil Hansen on the bench, there was just not much unpredictability about our attacking play, and that was proven the case.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm just wondering, looking ahead to January, How much do you think Ian Evatt is going to want to say, no, it's my way or the highway, and I'm going to do things absolutely, we have to play my, Ian Evatt style of football? Or do you think is he going to say, do you know what, between now and the end of the season, we've got a job to do to make sure that we finish, find 4 teams to finish above, which isn't by no guarantee at all. We've actually got to focus on whatever it takes to get results and just get ourselves out of this situation. And maybe in the summer we can have a bit more of a proper rebuild.
Yeah, it's a hard question, that, because we have spent a lot of money already in the summer. So I think if I was Sam and Sadler, I'd be wanting to see some return on my investment. So you'd like to think there's some money there to tweak the squad. Obviously, we've gone from a 4-4-2 to a 3-5-2. So it's a completely different formation. So you'd like to think there's some flexibility. I do think potentially Scott Banks and Emil Hansen might go back to their respective clubs, because I don't think they suit this formation at all. I think they are naturally wide players, and not wing backs. So I think if there's going to be some change in the January window, it might be more in the loan market. Scott Banks and Emil Hansen played against Harrogate in the EFL Trophy in the week, but I don't think they're natural starters in the league. So that's one thing to potentially look at in January. I mean, we do have still so many injuries. I'm sick of talking about injuries, but we've still got several players out. And I think when they come back into the fold, then we will be stronger. I mean, I think Everett's mentioned in the press yesterday that we've got Danny Imre back in training this week. We've got Dale Taylor back in training this week. We've got Josh Bowler back in training. I think Niall Ennis is only about a week or 2 away. So those 4 players come back into the team, it looks a lot different. So I do think they're pinning the hopes on those players coming back into the team and hopefully having some sort of influence. But yeah, I do think Everett will be looking to tweak certain areas of the pitch. I think definitely centre back and probably a more central ball playing midfielder.
Yeah, a bit more creative in there could certainly help. I mean, I think you've got legs in there with Evans, Honeyman, and Brown, that's for sure. But probably in terms of creativity, could do with something different. How have Bloxham and Fletcher looked as a strike pairing, Rob?
I'd say a bit hit and miss. I mean, to be honest with you, they've had to play every game because we've had nobody else. With Taylor and Ennis injured, Kouassi out on loan, we are down to 2 fit strikers. And you'd argue that Bloxham's not a natural striker. He's more of a sort of a wide player. So they've had to play every game. I must admit, I was surprised in the midweek game against Harrogate. I thought they might give Terry Bondo, who's a first-year pro, a chance, but they actually went with Fletcher and Bloxham. So they've played a lot of football over the last several weeks. So I think with Taylor and Ellis still being a week or 2 away, then they're going to have to play again. So that's the frustrating thing, that against Reading, when we went a goal down, Reading grew into the game. We just couldn't really change it because we didn't have any options in the final third, really. So it is a case of needs must. But hopefully Ennis and Taylor aren't too far away. And they've both got points to prove as well. They both come in the summer on big money. Ennis started the season on really well, then got suspended, then got injured. Taylor's not really lived up to his price tag yet, so they'll be desperate to come in and hopefully influence things on the pitch.
Yeah, those are players who can hopefully make a difference. I wanted to ask you about Bailey Peacock-Farrell, because he struggled at Birmingham last season, made 1 or 2 high-profile errors, I think, at the start of this campaign. Do you expect him to keep his place in January, or do you think you're going to recruit another? You've got, who's the ex-Wickham lad, Ravazoli? You've also got him there, haven't you? Yeah,
no, I've got to say, I think Peacock-Farrell's performances have improved. I think, like you said, the first game against Stevenage, he passed it straight to Dan Kemp, I think, for their 3rd goal. He had a bit of a howler, the away game at Exeter as well. So it was a poor start, but no, he's definitely improved. And I think he's gained in confidence. He made some good saves. He wasn't really at fault for any of the goals on Saturday against Reading. And Ravioli played midweek and didn't really. That's why I can never pronounce his name, so that's why I call him. But he's not exactly set the blood on fire. So I think Peacock-Farrell is the definite number 1. I do think there's other areas of the pitch that are more of a priority to Ian Evatt. So I would expect him to stay in the team. Like you say, he has definitely improved. I think a goalkeeping position, it's always about confidence, isn't it? If you get a couple of clean sheets, if you save a penalty, you collect a few crosses. He's played over 50 times in Northern Ireland, so he's got the experience. He's played in big games before, so I don't think he's a concern. There's other areas of the field which, to me, are more pressing for Ian Evatt. So I'd be surprised if he goes back, but obviously in football you never know. Everett might want his own keeper between the sticks.
I think we can agree, Rob, and from the way you're talking there, that returns from injury, hopefully 2 or 3 additions in January. The squad's more than good enough on individual quality to keep yourselves safe. At the same time, I'm a little bit concerned that, especially if we go above Exeter, that pack of teams 19th and above, they're 6 points above you at the moment. And so there is a bit of a gap to try and make up at the moment. So, is there that concern for you that you could be in danger of getting cut adrift?
Yeah, I think so. I think the biggest concern for me was against Reading. We started the game really well, actually. I mean, both the wing backs, Andy Lyons and Hayden Coulson, had absolutely golden opportunities to score. They both skied it over from close range. So obviously, if they go in, it's a completely different game. But after Reading scored the first goal towards the end of the first half, there was only one team in it. So whether that was Reading with the heads up or Blackpool heads down, but it was really alarming, that second half performance, that it was all one-way traffic. Reading were comfortably the better team, and we just had no sort of response to that. So that's concerning. And then we come to Harrogate in the EFL Trophy. Harrogate struggled in League Two. Yes, we made some changes, but we didn't make significant changes. We didn't play in the youth team. We played squad players like Emil Hansen, Scott Banks, Zach Ashworth, all players who played a numerous amount of games at higher levels. So you'd like to think you've got enough on the pitch with Bloxham and Fletcher. James Husband made his comeback from injury. There's enough there to be able to beat Harrogate, with all due respect to Harrogate. And I actually took my daughter swimming on Tuesday night, so I came back in 15 minutes late and I saw the third goal just go in. I was like, what is going on here? Because I saw the team sheet and I was quite happy. I thought, they're giving it a go here. They're playing quite a strong team. To go 3-0 down in the manner we did was just, it was unacceptable. I think Ian Everett was a bit spiky in his interview with the local press. He was sort of saying, the second half was really good, which it was better. But
Jesus,
it couldn't have been any worse. So I hope he's not starting down that route. But he came out again today saying that the world expects instant results. It's a project here, so I get that. He does need time. The players need to take a look at themselves as well, because I do think we should be in a higher position. I think the players have got to take responsibility. I think Steve Bruce took a lot of stick for that, but the players have got to stand up for themselves and put the effort in, because I do think they've been really poor. A lot of them have been underperforming for a long time now.
Yeah, so I think Ian Everett is a really good coach. I think the work that he did at Barrow on a low budget in the National League shows that he's got some of his ideas are very strong, certainly on a technical level. But that is probably the one thing that worries me a little bit in a scrap, is that I don't think his media management is especially strong. I think he can say things somewhat flippantly or sort of throwaway remarks, and sometimes they can get taken, and you just think, oh, come on, you've got to be a bit careful about how certain things are going to sound. Not all managers are very good at knowing how is this going to sound when I say it, and I think Ian's probably one of those who can be maybe prone to saying something and you regret thinking later.
I do think with Everton, I think it means so much to him. I think because it's Blackpool, he's played for the club for sort of 7-8 years. He was part of the promotion team to the Premier League. Obviously, his experience at Bolton turned sour at the end. I do think it's coming from the right place. He generally does love the club. He wants the club to do well. So it's probably a bit of frustration that he's coming. Obviously, it's not his team. There are a lot of injuries. He can't get the players to do what he wants them to do yet. It is a process. So I hope it can turn around. Like you say, I'm a bit concerned about the gap growing. I think there's teams down there as well, like Plymouth and Peterborough, who I think will get better as well. So we've got to be mindful of that. There's teams down there who you think, they'll struggle, but then they pick up wins. I know Burton have had a bit of a dip again, but they have the capability of winning games. And I think that's what Blackpool needs to do. They need to try and win games ugly. I think there's been some games that have sort of just drifted away from Blackpool, and teams have sort of, the Burton game is a prime example where the game turned into a Burton game. It became set piece heavy, scrappy, and it played perfectly into their hands. That's not disrespecting Burton. They're very good at what they do, and Blackpool had no answer to it. In fact, I think we only tested the keeper in the second half twice in injury time. So that's how the game went, because Burton made it like that. Whereas we've got to take grasp of it. We've got to put our game plan on, into practice. So there's a lot of work to do. I think after the Cardiff game a few weeks ago when we won, was it 4-1? Everyone was a bit up and thinking, oh, we're going to, suddenly surge up the table, and that's not going to happen. So a bit of a false dawn there, really. So, yeah, it's like every club, it's going to be a big January ahead. Hopefully, when we come to January, we're sort of not too far cut adrift. I mean, that's the hope, really, that we're there or thereabouts. And then with the players coming back in, 1 or 2 additions, hopefully to help the first 11, then we'll be okay. But it's going to be a big summer because I think there's a lot of players there who need to move on. But that's for another day. For now, it's about trying to stay in League One.
Absolutely. Rob, thanks so much for talking to us, and look forward to catching up later in the season.
Cheers, Gab. Take care.
Top man. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it, for League One? Certainly there's teams, we've spoken to fans of 3 of the clubs in the current bottom 4. I'm very worried about Exeter City with the situation they have off the field and the financial limitations in place. So I'm I think there's a very high likelihood that Exeter City finish bottom of the table just because of the financial concerns, whether they're going to find the money to pay their players and let alone anything like January. I've got some optimism for Port Vale in terms of chances translating into goals and the switch flicking, but I would need to see a bit more of what they showed in midweek against Barnsley in the EFL Trophy translated into league form. Blackpool and Plymouth Argyle, I mean, certainly Blackpool, I think, have the squad to climb away from danger. But it's whether it all sort of amalgamates and whether Ian Evatt tries to implement his ideas at a pace that's right for the situation. Similar with Peterborough, although I think they do have more of a squad lent towards that attacking style. And then Plymouth Argyle, who, again, I mean, I still think there's some talent there, but they definitely need those 2 experienced heads that come in January to be the right ones. So I think all those teams are going to be looking higher at the table at signs of weaknesses from the likes of Mansfield, Burton, Northampton, who do look pretty solid this season, as we heard from Danny. Reading have shown signs of pulling away. Doncaster have probably been better than results had suggested during their drop-off in form, and they've recently picked up a valuable win. So more questions than answers. Fascinating to see what happens. One to revisit. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again for another League One podcast.